All right, Julie, so we are here today to talk about your journey to reconnect with different parts of your family. And I want to start this with, the beginning of the journey. How did you start this whole thing, and what kind of was the launching pad to getting into that?
Well, I needed a driver's license when I turned 16, and I never knew my last name. So I went to the DMV and they wanted my birth certificate, and I didn't have one. So I went back home and I said, Mom, I need my birth certificate. So she had to send for it. She had to write to the Florida Department of Children's Services, where I was born in Miami, and get that information. So once it arrived in the mail, I looked at the envelope and it was addressed to me, and it said Julie Gentry. And I said, oh, that's my last name, Gentry. That's exciting. And now I know I'm a Gentry. And I was 16 at the time. I had a very happy childhood. I grew up in a wonderful house and family, had a great life. So I didn't really start pursuing it until a little bit later in life. Probably when I was 30, I found my mother first. And what I did was, since I knew her name, I looked up all of the Gentrys under my dad's name in the phone book, and I wrote them all down, and there were pages and pages of them, and she was the first one I called, which was amazing. She picked up the phone, and I spoke with her, and I said, I think I'm one of your daughters you gave up for adoption. And a long pause, of course, on her end. And she said, I asked her, you had 11 children. How many did you give up? And she said 7. And I said, okay. And that's how our journey began. So I spent the next 4 years with her up until she passed away. And she handed me all of the paperwork of everything that she had, because she was trying to look for her children herself. So I had the paperwork in my hand, and I looked through everything, and I said, you know what, I think I'm gonna start here. And this was before DNA, before Ancestry or 23andMe, and so it was difficult. And I actually did not find my first brother until 23andMe came out, when I got tested. And it turned out that his son tested himself, and we had a match there. So that's how I found my first brother, Daryl. And then once I found Daryl in 2021, I think, we had our reunion, and it was so special. And once I found him, I said, you know what, I've got to find these twins. I have to find my twin brothers. They were born in 1961, so they were a little bit older than me. So what I did then was, I went on Facebook, and there are a lot of adoption pages, web pages. So I signed up for all of them, and I told my story to every single one of them. And I didn't get that much of a response, but one day out of the blue, a woman contacted me, and she was a search angel for one of the adoption sites. Mm-hmm. And she said, I'd love to help you. And I was like, oh, this is wonderful, and she said, give me all your information. And I had copies of the twins' birth certificates, and that's all that she needed. So I emailed them to her, and she found them within 1 day. And I was so excited. And I she emailed me back all of the information, and she did snail mail with the paperwork. And I'm looking through the paperwork, and I see their names and where they're living. They were living in Arizona. I had their phone numbers on there too, and I didn't hesitate to call. I called one of them, and his name is Dave. Their names are Dave and Jeff. And I called Dave, and he answered the phone, and I asked him if he was a twin, and he said yes. And I said, were you adopted? And were you born in this place? And he said yes and yes. And I said, I think I'm your sister. And he said, well, we didn't know we had any sisters. I said, you have 10 other siblings that you don't know about, or 9 other siblings that you don't know about, that you need to meet, and we can all get together. And they were so excited. So it took a while to get things coordinated, because I'm in South Carolina and they're in Arizona. And so I got in touch with another news agency in Arizona, and they picked up the story there, and came to my house and did an interview with me at the house. And it was aired, and when I finally met them in Arizona, we met in Scottsdale, and it was just a wonderful reunion with them, and to see them in person and to hold them and touch them, because I was looking for them for 26 years. And when I finally found them, it was just magical.
That was like your, oh my gosh, I've done it moment.
Yes. Yes.
That is a nearly 3 decades long search. And
yes.
We've gone through, a lot of the steps in there, and that's not easy. Just in general, doing that search. And I know you got a little bit of help on the back end of things to finding them, but the grit and the dedication that it takes to go through something like that as well. And I want to backtrack for just a moment. You started, this whole thing with not knowing your last name, and you talked about you had a wonderful childhood, but I want to dig into that just a little bit deeper. When you were up for adoption, were you adopted by a family? Were you in foster care? What did your life look like to, where you had some of those major question marks still surrounding you?
Well, I was adopted from day one. My father, who raised me, was married, and they had 4 boys, and they always wanted a girl. So they adopted me. And my father's best friend was a lawyer, and he handled the adoption. So he called my father and said, there's a baby in Florida. Do you want to come? There's 2 actually. Do you want to come and see them? So he was 31 at the time, I think. And he took the first plane down to Florida, and there were 2 babies. And we were side by side in the bassinets, and I smiled. And I asked my dad, well, why did you pick me? He said, well, you were smiling. And I said, that was probably just gas. So, yeah, he brought me home, and with the 4 boys, so there was a family of 5. Unfortunately, my mother, who adopted me along with him, passed away when I was 6 months old, and remarried when I was 3 to another woman who had been divorced and had a 5-year-old girl. So that's my older sister, Lori. Yeah, so I grew up with 4 boys and a girl, so with 5 siblings, 6 of us together.
Okay, so it was more of you didn't know, what your birth last name was, because you were adopted and you were adopted into a family, so you were looking for that gentry name in the origins of it, so to say. But even then, you grew up with a ton of siblings. Take me back to what that feeling was like to learn that you were really one of 11 other siblings.
Oh, when I found out from my biological mother how many children she had, and what she was going through at the time, it wasn't a good time for her and her husband. And I asked her, why did you give us up? And she was forthright, and she said, well, it simply we couldn't afford you. We just couldn't afford to raise all these children. So we wanted to give them a better life. And I thought that was very, very touching. Yeah.
It's a very hard thing to be realistic about scenarios like that sometimes, but it seems that she was very open to meeting you and spending the time that she could with you later on. When you decided that you wanted to meet all of them, what was that feeling like? I mean, it's one thing to know and to understand that you have other origins of family and siblings and parents out there, but to make the decision, what did that process look like for you?
It was an easy decision, actually, because growing up I had a lot of friends, childhood friends, and they looked like their parents and their sisters and brothers, their siblings. They all looked alike, and I grew up in a family that had all dark hair, and I felt like, okay, there are people out there that are just like me, and I knew that I had idiosyncrasies that were not included with the family I grew up with. I had different thinking, I did things differently, and I thought to myself, you know what, I wonder if they're the same way. And it was just very emotional for me, because I just really wanted to know where I came from. And once I found out that, once I met my mother and my sisters, it was like looking in a mirror, and we ate the same way. We ate the same foods. We hated certain foods, and we walked alike. We talked alike, and we looked alike, and that was pretty exciting for me. Yeah.
It was like all these questions and wondering thoughts that you'd had your whole life finally clicked together.
Yes.
In those pieces. And I know, you mentioned that thankfully your birth mom wanted to develop a relationship, as have your twin brothers who are in Scottsdale, but not all of your siblings have been so open or, wanting to do that on that end. Tell me a little bit about that and what that part of the journey has been like, to understand that, maybe not all of them did have that same want and desire that you've been longing for decades.
Right. Well, I did think about that beforehand. I thought of, maybe some do not want to be contacted and just left alone and whatnot. I did get in touch with a sister, and she lives in Fort Lauderdale. And when I first called her, I think I may have overwhelmed her with these things, because none of these siblings knew that they had a huge family. They thought they were one of themselves being adopted. So I spoke with her, but she was very nice, but she wasn't very receiving of me. So I kind of let that go, and I was totally fine with that. I understood, I really did. If somebody called me out of the blue and said, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I'm your sister, and I want to meet you, and I would be overwhelmed myself, and I would probably think it was, somebody just trying to scam me, thinking that if I thought I was the only one in the family I would think, okay, I'm being scammed. I don't want to do anything with this. So she was kind of shy in that way.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's very fair and kind for you to give yourself some grace and give them some grace as well in,
Yes.
in understanding the impact that something like this can have, because it really can go either way. You've made the decision to pursue it and to learn about it, and it might be a little bit different for others in that situation. But on the flip side of things, like your twin brothers, you have developed some great relationships. And I
Yes.
know that it was solely from, the timeline of messages that you had sent us as your search was going, that you had found them back in 2022, but you weren't able, to meet them until a little bit later.
Yes.
But now that you know where they are, you know who they are, you've spent time together, what has that relationship and that development been like?
It was unbelievable. They were over the moon excited to hear from me and to see me and meet me. And they call me once a week at least, sometimes 2 times a week. And they definitely are twins, because Dave would call me. And then 10 minutes later, Jeff would call me, but they didn't tell each other that they were calling me. So they're in sync with themselves.
They have their twin telepathy going on.
I think so. So every time I talk to them on the phone, they always say, "Oh, we love you so much, and we're so happy we got together and we got to meet you." And we're so grateful to you for finding us. And they were just so thankful all the time, and they still are. I just spoke to one of them, Jeff, yesterday, and I told him about where I was going today, and he said, "That's so exciting, and I'm so happy." And he said, "It's just so sad that we live so far apart." And I keep saying, "Well, move here," and they keep saying, "Well, move here." And I wish we were closer as far as geographical, but we do talk on the phone a lot. Yeah.
And I mean, thankfully, we do have better travel systems and things that, it's plane ride or so away that you can visit each other. And I know you went out to Scottsdale to meet them, so
Yes.
you got to go down to the valley and check out somewhere that's totally different than here. And
Yes.
very, very far away. Your journey has become a coast-to-coast situation at this point. Do you have any plans upcoming for moving or visiting, whether that's them coming to you or you going to them in the future?
Yes, they initially wanted to come between my birthday and their birthday. So my birthday was April and theirs is late May. So they wanted to come in between that time, but plans have changed, and now they want to come later on this year in the fall, where it's not too cold and not too hot.
It'll be a perfect time.
Yes.
That's when the valley it's still 100 degrees, and
Yes.
it's the end of September, so that'll be a nice little fall getaway for them too. I'm very excited for you to be able to have them come to your side of the U.S. over here to see that. And moving forward, your journey has not stopped there. Another really big key to this huge puzzle that you've been piecing together for years now, you have one sibling left that you are trying to find.
I am.
Tell me all about that.
Oh my gosh, she was born in Tampa General Hospital on August 13th, 1967. And I have her hospital records, but of course there are no names. And I have contacted both the hospital and the Florida Department of Children and Services, and Florida is a very closed state. You have to go through so much red tape just to even get your birth certificate. Like, it took me months to get my birth certificate. And I'm hoping that I find her, that we all find her, and that we can get together and join her. We don't know where she was adopted to. She could be still in Florida or in another state. So finding her would be that last piece of the puzzle would make it come together. And yeah, I would be over the moon excited if I could find her.
And have you made any other progress? I know, you kind of found each sibling in a different way. I mean, some of them were connected to the ancestry DNA that you found with 23andMe. The other one was the search angel that came along to help you with some of the birth certificates. Do you have any other leads other than, you know that she was born at Tampa General Hospital? Has there been any other sort of niche ways that have started you on a path to finding her?
No, I am still on the Facebook adoption sites, and every couple of months I tell my story again, and hopefully another search angel will help me with that. And like I said, Florida is such a closed state, and it's so hard. So I'm hoping I can find somebody that can help me get some more information on or guide me on how to find her. That would be a wonderful thing.
Beautiful. Well, I hope it all works out and you get one of those little, it sounds like it was almost the least expecting moments for you when you found these other siblings, that they just kind of popped up, or some sort of aid came to it when the time was right to help you make that final push into locating them.
Yes.
And before we start to wrap things up, we've talked a lot about, your one sister who wasn't as receptive to building something, your brothers who you've built a wonderful relationship with, and your sister you're still looking for. There are still a handful of other siblings on that track of your 11.
Right.
Would you like to talk about, your relationships, or what it was like finding any of your other brothers and sisters?
I did find one brother, Daryl, in Tallahassee, and I had a meeting with him. I met him and his family, wonderful family, and he's just like a big teddy bear. He was very receiving. The other siblings, unfortunately, have passed.
And that it's a hard thing to, you found them, but they're older. Or do you know where you are in the lineup of 12? Are you, in the middle? Are you the youngest?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so the first child she had, I think they were born in 1954. And then her last child, Daryl, he's the youngest. He was born in 69.
Okay.
And then there's the sister, the one that I'm looking for, she was born in 67. And I was born in 65. So I'm third to the last that she had.
Okay, so you're one of the younger ones who's embarking on this journey and trying to find everyone. I'm sorry to hear that, the other siblings have passed, but in it all, it's still a wink to your success in looking for those puzzle pieces. You still were able to find out something about them and about their lives, and you've connected, like you said, the other pieces of the puzzle that make it a whole for you, and you get to enjoy the time with them for that.
Yes.
Is there anything that we didn't get to dive into or talk about? I know you mentioned your mom and you spoke with her and developed a relationship with her. Did you ever do it with your dad? Did you ever want to speak with him?
I missed my dad by 3 years. He had died in 93, and I found my mother in 96. So I missed him. But I was told by my mother that he would have been tickled to have met me. And I know that she was looking herself, getting in contact with different organizations, finding her other children. But it was just like a dead-end road for her all the time. Because like I said, back then they didn't have the resources or the DNA testing like we have today, which I'm so thankful for. So yeah, I'm sorry I didn't get to meet my father. Yeah.
It's hard. Again, I mean, just like you said, you find siblings and, there isn't that opportunity to meet them. But I'm so glad that you've had the opportunity to meet your mom and the siblings that you have found and things. And that last little bit of the journey continues, I think I want to wrap this up by asking for your sister that you're still looking for. If you could give a message, if you could say something to her right now, if she were to see this, what would you tell her?
Oh my gosh. Oh, I would say, if you see this, please contact the station, and please reach out to me, reach out to the crew here, because you have a lot of siblings who would love to meet you. That's what I would say to her.